Ford Council is meeting in Detroit Monday to review a tentative new labor deal with Ford. If approved, that deal will be sent to Ford UAW workers for a ratification vote. The Ford deal, according to the Detroit Free Press, is richer than the GM agreement was and provides $9 billion in investment commitments for U.S. operations. Over the weekend, the UAW's GM vote totals showed approval of the tentative labor agreement overall with GM by production workers, but skilled trades workers voted no. 59.5% to 40.5%. The UAW says as a result, it has, quote, not deemed the tentative agreement ratified, end quote. The union says it will hold meetings over the next several days to determine why skilled trades rejected the GM deal and determine what to do next. North America's building trades unions says that the Obama administration's rejection of the Keystone XL pipeline is an insidiously craven political action. Building trades president Sean McGarvey says, quote, despite this administration's own findings that the Keystone project will result in the creation of 40,000 jobs as well as significant economic benefits to our country without impacting the environment, President Obama has chosen to place politics over substantive policy that only serves to advance the agenda of well-funded radical environmentalists, end quote.
This is Mitch Lawrence with the Sports Minute for Workers Independent News. They've put the bats and baseballs away, and here's our takeaway from the 2015 baseball season. The Royals deserve to win their first World Series in 30 years. You might have missed most of the excitement and drama because the Royals came back in 3 games after the 8th inning to record their wins. That's typical of this Kansas City team, who made late-inning rallies a staple of their astounding playoff run. But for some of us on the East Coast, Nenyo's teams pulled out those wins long after we had gone to sleep. The Royals won for only the second time in their team history, and they've built a team to compete for a few more titles. The Mets, well, they've got the young arms to contend, but 2 of their top players are heading into free agency, and the Mets just might let them walk. Daniel Murphy and Yoenis Cespedes were the Mets hitting stars before they both had a World Series to forget. Murphy just received a 1-year qualifying offer from the Mets for around $16 million, but he's expected to leave if he gets a richer multi-year offer from another team. Cespedes only came to the Mets late in the season and proved he was one of the team's top all-around players of all time. But he wants a 6-year deal at top dollar, and the Mets are not going to splurge for a player who's been with 4 teams over the last 2 seasons. Exciting as he is, he's not the world's most focused player, as they came to learn. So it'll be an interesting offseason for the Mets, especially if they have to replace Daniel Murphy and Yoenis Cespedes.
Brought to you by the IBEW, 750,000 men and women powering the way for an American comeback. Information on how to become an International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers Power Professional is online at ibew.org.
You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
It's time for the Rick Smith Show.
I want you to get up now. I want all of you to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore.
I don't want to abolish government. I simply want to reduce it to the size where I could drag it into the bathroom and drown in the bathtub.
You bet I cut the taxes at the top.
How dare you? How dare you? Go ahead, make my day.
The Rick Smith Show starts now.
This town gonna be here long after I'm gone. East side, west side, people don't surrender. They've been down, but they still rise on. Oh, and this time is my time. All right, love or hate, it don't matter. I'm gonna stand and fight. This time is my time. She got her ups and downs, but love or hate, it don't matter. 'Cause this is my time.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks for being here today on the big program. Lots of things to get to, lots to talk about. Trans-Pacific Free Trade Agreement. Not a lot of good in this. I'm hearing nothing good for working people at all. And it's hard to say that there's nothing at all. From what I've been seeing and the folks that I've been talking to, literally nothing good if you are a wage slave. Nothing. Maybe some lower paying jobs in the import-export business, more the import part, but nothing outside of that. And we're going to talk about what it means to workers, what it means to small family farmers, because we're told that the victory side of this trade agreement is our agribusiness. Agriculture is going to get access to other markets, and we'll be able to sell all over for lower tariffs. That's what we're told. And the draw is, well, the small family farmer will be protected. Well, we're going to find out what it means to them as we talk to an organization focused solely on the family farmers. So that should be very interesting to go there. Also, a little bit of what's going on the state level with the negotiations between the PASHA universities and the professors and the faculty folks, what that means for them, for us, for students, all of that stuff. And also, it is Badass Teacher Monday. We're going to talk to a couple of educators about ethnic diversity. Also, maybe having courses in other than just American history. Maybe widen the birth of our understanding. Maybe begin to talk about other cultures, and maybe, just maybe, and I know this is way out there, maybe become a little bit more tolerant of others. Just kind of a thought. Anyway, over the weekend, my email box bombed. Governor Wolf did something not happy with, and I just have to get that out. I voted for Governor Wolf. I supported Governor Wolf. I'm a fan. I've donated to his campaign. I like the guy on a personal level. Not happy with signing this what I can only assume is a trouble bill. And we've talked about this for some time. The right wing has posed it as a stalking bill. They've posed it as that, union members have this special right that needs to be corrected because they've all got weapons of mass destruction and they're putting together the suitcase bomb. It's all coming. So we know it's all coming, right? Because they have this special power, which is ludicrous. I mean, just absolute nonsense. But it's how it was sold. In fact, I did a panel bit not too long ago where one of the main focuses was on this carve out for labor management disputes, because they understood the law. I mean, we used to have common sense in this country, just so you remember. And maybe you didn't know, but we used to. Because when you're having a heated disagreement, you're having a heated negotiation, sometimes tempers flare, sometimes people say dumb things, sometimes now what the Republicans want, the small government people, what they want is they want government in the middle of that. So, and the argument that the right gives, well, this, business will be held accountable for this too. And you go, but wait a second. So now you've got 67 different ways of enforcing this law, right? And the answer is yes. This is a political football. This is an enormous win for the Republicans. This was on their wet dream wish list, and they just got it. And the governor signed it. He didn't even just let it go tacitly into law by ignoring it. He signed it into law. And this gives them a huge win. And I can only imagine the thought process behind it is, we'll give you this huge ideological win, which will make you all tingly in the panties and all. And then you'll come to some place, somewhere, maybe just south of sanity. I'm not even asking for north, just somewhere near the sanity line. And then we can talk about a budget. It's an interesting thought. And it's one that Democrats tend to think is how things go. That, okay, well, we'll give you what you want. You give us what we want. And that kind of reciprocity just doesn't seem to happen. And I'm often, I'm often amused at that simplistic view. Now, it'll be interesting to see. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I am. But it'll be interesting to see where this goes. Do the Republicans now come honestly to the table, knowing that the governor has given a huge a huge hand across and a huge win to the Republicans at a time where I don't think he had to. He gave in and said, "Okay, here's your pound of flesh. Now we've got to come and talk." Trust me when I tell you that this only emboldens them. They got he caved on that. And we're going to stick it to workers and stick it to their ability to organize and really put a chilled effect on organizing. Because what this is going to do is, trust me, nobody's going to jail. But what it's going to do and what the point is, and this is what the right understands, it's to harass organizers. What, you called their house and you knocked on their door and you sent them mail? That's stalking. And we'll arrest you for the day, take you to jail, and then you'll get your lawyer to come bail you out. And there's a whole process involved with that. And you know what's happening during that time of being arrested and getting out and doing all that stuff? You know what's not happening? Organizing. And that's the point. It's busy work. It's a waste of time, energy, money. That's the point. It's not about protecting anybody's rights. That's nonsensical. They don't believe in that. Just like they don't believe in smaller, less intrusive government. Because if that were the case, they wouldn't go anywhere near this. But they want government right between your ears. So I look at this and I go, well, what's the next ideological wish list item? And the next item that's on the wish list is privatization of the state wine and spirit stops. They want that, and they've wanted that for years now. And the reality is I don't think the governor gives on this. I don't see how he can. But I look at the money that we would lose and the wealth that we would lose in all of this. And we're going to be talking about this pretty much all week, because I think this is another one of those really important moments. In the two places that have recently done what the Republicans want, Iowa and West Virginia. Iowa in the 80s and West Virginia just several years back. I think it was I guess West Virginia was probably a little bit later than that, 89, 90, somewhere around there. You look at what those happened to those two states who had control of their wine and spirits, had control of the liquor, and generated substantial revenue from it. And in fact, increasing revenue every year, went into the coffers to pay the bills. What happened when those two states went to the privatized system that the Republicans are now pushing us at? You saw substantial drops in revenue. And who made that revenue up? Well, we did. And where did that revenue that used to come to the taxpayers go? To private hands. I don't think it gets any simpler than that. I don't think I can boil it down to anything more simplistic than this is theft, then this is a massive ripoff, that this is a scheme to steal tax dollars from the coffers. I mean, if you can think of a better way of framing that, I love the fact that the free my beer and free my liquor, your liquor is already there and you can get it anytime within business hours that you want. I've lived in this state for 22 years now. And every time I've wanted beer, I know where it is. Every time I've wanted liquor, you know what? I know where the stores are. It doesn't get any simpler than that. And I guess, we live in this impulse world where the right wing wants us to say, well, we'll put liquor in all the grocery stores, and we can still do that without giving up control of the asset. And it's just curious to me how our friends on the radical right are going to play this. What I'm looking for, what is our governor going to do? Where does this go from here? And this is one of those moments where the Republicans go, oh, he caved. We can get him to cave on this too. So it's going to be interesting. And I'm looking forward to watching it as a political observer and seeing where this takes us. But I'd also love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm going to take a quick break. When we come back and talk with Admiral Joe Sestak, it is this week, Veterans Day, coming up this week. It'll be interesting to get his thoughts and find out what he's up to these days. Let's take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1935. The Committee for Industrial Organizations was created by 8 unions as part of the American Federation of Labor. United Mine Workers President John L. Lewis was the driving force behind this new committee. His aim was to organize mass production industrial workers as opposed to focusing on those in the skilled trades. While the American Federation of Labor had included some industrial unions, the craft unionists were the dominant force in the organization. The Great Depression had hit industrial workers and their unions hard. Leaders from the heavily affected unions pressed for more support from the AFL. In response, the AFL did authorize organizing drives in the automobile, rubber, and steel industries, but they gave little financial support or effective leadership to those unions. Matters came to a head at the AFL's 1935 convention when mine workers president John L. Lewis punched the president of the Carpenters Union. Afterwards, Lewis called together various industrial union leaders, including Sidney Hillman, head of the Amalgamated Clothing Workers, and Harvey Fleming of the Oil Workers Union, to discuss the creation of the CIO. In its statement of purpose, the CIO declared its aim to encourage the AFL to organize by industry. However, the AFL's leadership was not sympathetic to what they saw as an internal rivalry. In 1936, the AFL suspended all of the CIO unions. This led to the industrial union's breakaway from the AFL to form a rival federation. The CIO changed its name to the Congress of Industrial Organizations. By 1938, the CIO had amassed 3 million members. The CIO ran successful organizing drives in auto, mining, meatpacking, and steel. The two union organizations finally remerged in 1955, forming what is known today as the AFL-CIO.
This is the Media Matters Minute. I'm John Whitehouse. The Bureau of Labor Statistics released their jobs report for October, and here's how the co-hosts of Fox & Friends, Steve Doocy and Elizabeth Hasselbeck, covered it.
You know the music. We're back with the Fox Business Alert right now. The October jobless report for hourly workers just released 90 seconds ago. The unemployment rate is, as you can see right there, 5%. I believe that could be actually a little lower than in August and in September as well.
That's right, Steve. Only 271,000 new jobs were added last month. That is up from September as well. Analysts were expecting more than 180,000 jobs for October.
While Fox covered the jobs report less than enthusiastically, it easily beat analyst expectations. America added 271,000 jobs in October, making it the largest monthly jobs gain so far this year. This is just the latest attempt by Fox to minimize the significance of a strong monthly jobs report. For more on this and other stories, please visit MediaMatters.org.
Just a day job that someone's got to do. It's kinda hard when everyone looks up to you. Try to make it look easy, gonna make it look good, like anybody would. I'm just your average, ordinary, everyday superhero.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. So Wallet Hub has a new report out right now, the best and worst cities in the country for veterans. Obviously, Wednesday is Veterans Day, so take a look at that. Irvine, California, the best place in the country, followed by Scottsdale, Arizona, Raleigh, North Carolina, Orlando, Florida, Gilbert, Arizona. Worst place in the world, in the country for vets, Detroit, Michigan, Newark, New Jersey, Hialeah, Florida. Surprisingly to me, Boston, and then Miami. Here in Pennsylvania, you had Pittsburgh ranked 55th, Philadelphia 75th, so pretty far down on the list. But this is the week that we appreciate our veterans. I thought it'd be a good opportunity to reach out to former Congressman and Admiral Joe Sestak, get his thoughts on what's going on. Joe, thanks for taking time for us.
Good to be with you, Rick. Thank you. An important week.
So I look at this, Philadelphia 75th. I mean, that's your backyard. That's, part of the area that you've represented at some point during your career. What do you think of that? 75th on the list?
I missed the opening of this. 75th on the list of what?
The best and worst cities in the country for veterans.
Well, yeah, let me tell you, though, something. Here's what I really think. What also came out this weekend, if you noticed, is Philadelphia is the first United States city designated in the world to be a heritage site. It is actually now, with other 200 cities around the world, designated because it recognizes not just that it is the cradle of freedom, Rick. It recognizes that our soul was born there. Those three great words that begin our Constitution, we the people. So 75th, number one, number 150, we will always recognize that we the people is what matter in America, and that's why we'll always love Philly.
Yeah, good point. And this week, like I said, this is Veterans Day Wednesday. This is the week but I think every week we should be focusing on the people who've sacrificed for our country and help provide the freedoms that we enjoy. But someone sent me a video that of this Sergeant Tan who told this wonderful story about you're helping him and other vets as well. But I thought it'd be interesting to talk about that and maybe talk a little bit about Sergeant Tan's story.
Sergeant Khan, a hero, done more than I've ever done in my 31 years as he sacrificed his two legs, a double amputee in serving our nation on the third tour, I remember, to Iraq. He came home and suddenly he had a problem. He couldn't get the right physical therapy done. Someone said, call Congressman Sestak's office. He called. Actually, he didn't call. We heard about it, and a Navy captain who I went off to the Navy with as we graduated from high school together, retired together, ran my office, Billy Walsh, another hero, and said, what's the situation? We've heard about you. So we worked it, got him the right health insurance coverage. Number two, he then had a problem with his tuition where he'd been at Cabrini. All of a sudden, people needed some money and helped pay up, but he double amputee, been to war, addressed the issue again as he came to us. But a third one was his wife, Cambodia, stuck up in a broken immigration system. Again, called the office, reached out and took care of it. The issue isn't us. It's that here is a veteran that caught up in red tape in America, and a government of, for, and by the people wasn't assisting this individual who has done more than most of us would ever dream of doing. And so that's why we wanted to highlight him, what he did for this nation this week on that is Veterans Week.
And that story is important because the reality is we think about Congress people, we think about senators, we think about our elected officials, and I think a lot of people have forgotten that they're there to help. I think we've gotten mired in this this push pull between ideology, but at the end of the day, they're still there to help.
That's absolutely right. We kept our office as a congressman here in the district open 7 days a week, every day up until 8 o'clock at night. We rotated about 50 interns underneath our staff so that everybody didn't have to obviously work 7 days. But here was the issue. We handled 18,000 individuals who came in over those 4 years with an issue from some woman who had cervical cancer, and her insurance company denied her care because 4 years earlier she had missed a $27 payment increase one time.
Jeez.
We also had children that came in with their parents who had autism, where the school board wasn't properly addressing their issue with a proper 504 plan. And so this is what I believe in a government of, for, and by the people, but it is for people. And so we made sure that people could come in and be properly addressed with their issues, their concerns. And frankly, that's why I walked across this state, to let people know I will walk in your shoes as your United States Senator.
Here's the thing with Veterans Day being Wednesday, Joe. I look at this week as one of those weeks to look back, honor those people who have served this country so valiantly and so with dignity and honor, and to make sure that I don't ever have to see again what I saw as a kid growing up in the 70s as men were coming back from Vietnam, just basically being dumped into our community. And I was not for the Iraq War. I was not for getting in the middle of all of that. But I said at the time, if we're going to do it, the commitment that we have to make is, if we're sending these men and women over there, we have to make sure that they get all of the services and all of the help and all of everything that they need without having to go through red tape, without having to go beg in public or do any of that stuff. And sadly, it's better, but it's not what it should be.
No, it's not what it should be. When I went to Congress in 2007, because of the underfunding of the VA, the Veterans Administration, we had the vote for the largest budget increase ever, $10 billion for the VA. Why? Because so many were coming home with the signature issue of the wars of Iraq and Afghanistan, which was post-traumatic stress disorder, and also traumatic brain injury. And yet today, we still have a backlog of those who are applying to the VA in order to ensure that their disabilities are properly taken care of. I will go to a prison this week, as I did every year on Veterans Day as a congressman, and even after I was no longer a congressman, every year I go to visit our vets. There's an Afghanistan war veteran I met a year ago when I visited another prison, and he came home a couple years earlier during a recession. Unemployment was so high for vets as compared to even the civilian population. He started dealing, he had a problem, PTSD and some drugs, one of those stupid mandatory sentences for a relatively minor crime, and he's there in prison because we did not take care of him when he came home. That's why I go to visit them, to let them remember that, yeah, you served us, and I, at least, with many Americans, like I say now, won't forget you. Let's get the proper treatment for our vets when they come home.
Yeah, but here's the thing, and I think everybody agrees, and even all of the politicians, this should be bipartisan. This should be nonpartisan. Every politician I know loves to take photos with the vets in their uniforms and the flags waving and all that stuff. But yet here we are still talking about all of these problems and all of these obstacles, and it's been all of these years, and you go, how do you fix that?
And you can only fix it, I think, by making sure that you have public officials, hopefully more that have served, that actually know that you are going to be judged not by your words, but by your deeds. Take our present Senator, Pat Toomey. He voted as a congressman to send me to war. He actually came to my ship, took a picture on my aircraft carrier with me and others, came home and voted against every single Veterans Administration budget as a congressman and a senator until this past December. He voted against the jobs bill. That was a bipartisan bill, and against the mental health benefits bill that would have addressed, as it was a standalone bill, the challenge that we have with the suicide rate, for example, of our women veterans is 7 times higher than women in civilian life because of the trauma, including sexual, that they go through in the military. We got problems to address, and we can't do it with public officials that want a photo op on an aircraft carrier, so vote to send us to war, and then come home and vote against the fairness for our veterans in transitioning into civilian life in the areas they need, from jobs to home, not being homeless, to drug and alcohol treatment for perhaps they have challenges there, to whatever they need to get there, that safe transition.
You're listening to the Rick Smith Show here with former Congressman and Admiral Joe Sestak. You want to check out his website, joesestak.com. We've got a link at the ricksmithshow.com. But, here's the thing, Joe, that gets me. I mean, I look at Pat Toomey, Senator Toomey, and as you've said, he's voted against all of these things that would have helped the military, would have helped the military families. And yet you still see these bumper stickers and all of this Veterans for Toomey stuff. I got a question, how is it that some of these veterans are going, yeah, he's our guy? I'm confused at that.
Because as you had the Koch brothers come in and put $1.5 million in over the last few months in ads where they say, well, Pat Toomey, our buddy from Wall Street, he's actually helped veterans. But yet what the Koch brothers want is a plan where it cuts the VA by 1/3. So they just, as politicians like Pat Toomey do, they say that they support veterans. And then they can point to a bill. Here he voted against every bill that would support homelessness for our veterans. Every single one, up through this past December. And yet, what he did do is a bill with others voted for that would say if there's lost luggage with some clothing at the airport, that normally the airport will give to charity. Well, guess what? Now they can give it to veterans.
Oh, wow, that's great. We're going to give them secondhand. You can't make that up.
I didn't make that up. And so, but now what he can say is, I voted for a bill for veterans. And then you peel it apart and you say, what did it really do? Look, I'm really glad that he has been promoted out and promotes himself out there for getting a VA named after one of our heroes. But then why did he not fight to get the VA funded? I mean, that dog doesn't hunt. And I am someone who strongly believes, not just because I'm a vet, but because I saw as a congressman, and so many of veterans like P.C. Tan, who gave his legs for this nation, and yet the prosthetics that he needed, Pat Toomey voted against. And that is why I am so upset with public officials who will say one thing here in Pennsylvania and vote the exact opposite way in D.C.
And the $1.5 million you're talking about, I think that came from a group that I love, and I love these euphemistic names. Concerned Veterans for America. That's the front group, the Koch brothers front group. And you got to love the name at least, right?
You got to love the name. But once again, that's why the biggest issue in America today is a lack of trust, because people know in their hearts that they're being told one thing, but people are doing a different thing in D.C. And, frankly, that's why it's so important that we constantly try to ensure that people understand that what's in their interest has to be brought to them in an honest, fair, transparent way. And frankly, Pat Toomey does not do that.
It's just amazing to me. Last question I've got for you. There's been a big controversy at the end of last week, and with you being a Naval Academy graduate, I wanted to get your thought on, and it's the presidential race, but that's all right. Ben Carson's gotten himself in a little hot water by basically the center of his whole life story being that he turned down a military academy scholarship. He called it. I think it's an appointment, but it's a whole nother thing. I'm curious, because the person I talked to on Friday was pretty ticked off by it. I'm curious your thoughts.
Well, having gone through the appointment process, as you well say, Rick, and having overseen it as a congressman, because you don't just apply for a scholarship to the academies. You go through a selection process through your elected representatives. A congressman, a senator, a vice president, or the president of the United States must appoint you. For someone not to remember that they did or didn't go through that process is beyond the understanding of me. There's interviews that are done for that. There, you actually have to apply and fill out paperwork. You just don't get offered something after a meeting. It is one of the most, if not the most, meritocracy in points of selection that you can have. As a matter of fact, as a congressman, I had 3 layers. I had former a superintendent of the Air Force Academy on the selection board. I had professors, I had business people who would be around and select the best of the applicants. And when it came to me, I just reviewed it to make sure there's no egregious mistakes and approved it. So there was no politics involved. You can't forget that process.
Yeah, no, because I remember, because as it was going on, I remember back to my being in high school, and there were 2 kids I knew who got appointments, one to the Coast Guard Academy and one to Annapolis. And there were a couple of us that had thought about, hey, let's try and go through that. And I immediately looked at it and said, my grades are horrible. There's no way I'm going to bother going through all of this litany of stuff to attempt to be told no. And which I didn't apply, but I could easily have said, like he did, I turned down the idea.
Turned down the idea, and that's what people can say. But look, when I graduated, I did get accepted. But I will tell you this: the selection process today, the youth that are applying and are getting in, I don't think I could get in today. The quality of the youth that are applying to serve this nation is awesome. And thank the Lord every day for the youth of America, because we sure somehow make them great.
Yeah. I'll tell you the last bit. I look at that statement by Ben Carson and I go, there's a guy who just politically not very astute, because this is a country that looks to its military with pride and with honor and respect the people who serve. This was one of those moments where he said, I walked away. Most times when you hear people, they try to prop themselves up and say they did more than they did.
Yeah. And look, I think it points to an issue that we started off this whole conversation with a bit. This nation is yearning for those they might trust, to where it's not the word they say, it's actually the deed they do. And in my mind, this issue, or the failure to take care of our vets, is something that really speaks, I think, to what America most wants: a leadership that can be trusted. And I think it's far too absent down in Washington, D.C.
There you go. The big primary coming up this March, I believe, right?
I think it's April.
April this year?
I think it's end of April.
All righty. So we will have you back before then as things go on. If folks want to take a look at your website, joesestak.com. Joe, really great talking with you. I appreciate you taking time and sharing some of your thoughts. And best of luck this week, and happy Veterans Day.
Happy Veterans Day to you, Rick. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Joe Sestak. Again, joesestak.com. We've got a link at thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Has come, and the land is dark, and the moon is the only light we'll see. No, I won't be afraid. Oh, I won't be afraid, just as long.
A good profit is profit that comes from contributing to society.
Koch brothers claim they are environmental stewards.
It is said, if you find yourself in a hole, quit digging.
New legislation to stop all fossil fuel extraction on public lands. More bad news for Volkswagen. Plus,
we have told TransCanada that the review process is going to continue.
U.S. State Department rejects TransCanada's request for a pause on the Keystone XL pipeline.
All of those stories and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment. Okay, Desi Doyen, TransCanada was trying to cancel the Keystone XL pipeline review, but now President Obama won't let them?
That's right. They have been denied. The U.S. State Department has rejected the request from TransCanada, the owner of the controversial proposed Keystone XL pipeline, to suspend its application for a cross-border permit. It was a request widely seen as an attempt to wait for a potentially friendlier administration. In rejecting the request, State Department spokesman John Kirby on Wednesday cited the time and money invested by several agencies and the millions of public comments received in the process.
So all of this work, all of this money has been spent reviewing their application, and before it gets rejected, they want to stop the whole procedure.
Yeah, it's like breaking up with somebody before they have a chance to break up with you.
But in this case, Obama might say, no, I'm going to break up with you anyway. I'm going to reject your application, and thus make it a little bit harder for the next president to come along and approve it.
That's right. That's exactly what he's doing.
Well, that's fun.
Meanwhile, scientists say that to prevent catastrophic climate change, 80% of the world's remaining fossil fuel reserves must remain in the ground unburned. And to that end, Democratic Senator Jeff Merkley of Oregon and Independent Senator and Democratic presidential candidate Bernie Sanders of Vermont introduced the Keep It in the Ground bill in the U.S. Senate on Wednesday. It would prohibit all new leases to extract fossil fuels on public lands, not to reduce fossil fuels from public lands, but to eliminate them. In a press conference, Senator Merkley called it a crucial step to action on climate change.
Let's take on this climate change challenge. Let's make our federal lands off limits, and let's do the smart thing and keep it in the ground.
The bill would also ban new offshore drilling in the Atlantic Ocean and in the Arctic, and would help transition fossil fuel industry workers. The bill isn't likely to go anywhere in the Republican-controlled Senate, but as they say, it does begin the process of educating the American people about what we have to do.
So what's it called again?
The Keep It in the Ground bill.
Kind of sounds like Keep It in Your Pants bill, but I won't mention that.
Please don't.
I won't.
More bad news for Volkswagen. Remember, German automaker Volkswagen was caught red-handed last month using software to cheat U.S. emissions tests on as many as 11 million Volkswagen brand diesel cars since 2009. Now, this week, Volkswagen voluntarily has halted sales of its Porsche brand SUV in the United States after the Environmental Protection Agency said it found similar cheat software on those models. But wait, there's more. Volkswagen has also admitted this week that it underestimated the actual carbon dioxide emissions and fuel consumption in regulatory filings affecting some 800,000 vehicles in Europe. Volkswagen says it deeply regrets this newest mistake.
Doesn't anyone check their claims when they make them, or is this completely self-regulated?
Often, car makers are allowed to submit their own tests for certification.
Nothing like voluntary self-oversight.
Finally, some fact-checking for MSNBC. In what I think is a fawning interview with billionaire Koch brother Charles Koch this week, the hosts of MSNBC's Morning Joe did not challenge the abysmal environmental record of the Koch brothers' businesses when Charles Koch claimed his idea of success includes protecting the environment.
For a business, this means producing products and services that your customers value more than the alternatives, while more efficiently using resources and being among the safest and environmentally protective producer.
For the record, Koch Industries is not among the safest and environmentally protective producers. Koch Industries has a long history of profiting from egregious violations of environmental laws. Koch Industries pled guilty for several massive toxic benzene releases in Texas and covered it up. They contaminated Oklahoma's groundwater with jet fuel and toxic oil wastewater and cheated Native Americans out of royalties from oil and gas on tribal lands.
Other than that, the Kochs are fantastic, totally responsible, and great for the environment. Keep it in your pants. For much more on all of our stories today and the ones we couldn't get to, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find us and follow us on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
We are caught up in your love affair, and we'll never be royal. It's a running our blood. That kind of love's just ain't for us.
We will have so much winning if I get elected that you may get bored with winning. Believe me, I agree. You'll never get bored with winning. We never get bored. We are going to turn this country around. We are going to start winning big league.
Yes, winning bigly. How many people took a look at the Saturday Night Live? Evidently the highest ratings they've had in the last several years. The one thing that Donald does do is he brings in the viewers. I watched some of the clips. It was all right. I give him credit. He's a very good entertainer. Not so sure he'd make a very good president, but of the field on the Republican side, you got to wonder. I look at Ben Carson, and the reason I brought up Carson to Sestak is, I had a couple of those conversations with folks who served in the military, and I go, what are your thoughts on this? And to a person, everyone found it distasteful. Everyone said, you know what, that's it's just not something you do. It's and the other part of it for me is it's kind of a slap in the face to the military. And, most of them, they don't want to get into that, but interesting. Also, I thought Carson's statement over the weekend that he's been more scrutinized than Obama or basically anyone else is just flat wrong. If you remember the Clinton years, if you remember that campaign, oh, wow. And Obama was heavily scrutinized. In fact, there was a whole birther movement that came up around it. I just found it very interesting. And to be honest, I agree with Chris Christie. I don't have a lot of sympathy for Carson. I think what he's done has been very amateurish, and you should probably fire the people around you. Now like I said last week, his crisis management team, nice job. Nice job. Maybe they should go find a job working for Jeb, because some recent polling out by McClatchy and Marist, they've come out and said, look, the more people find out about people like Carson, people like Cruz and Rubio, the more they like them on the conservative side. The more they find out about Jeb Bush, well, not so much.
Certification.
Nothing like voluntary self-oversight.
Finally, some fact-checking for MSNBC. In what I think is a fawning interview with billionaire Koch brother Charles Koch this week, the hosts of MSNBC's Morning Joe did not challenge the abysmal environmental record of the Koch brothers' businesses when Charles Koch claimed his idea of success includes protecting the environment.
For a business, this means producing products and services that your customers value more than the alternatives, while more efficiently using resources and being among the safest and environmentally protective producer.
For the record, Koch Industries is not among the safest and environmentally protective producers. Koch Industries has a long history of profiting from egregious violations of environmental laws. Koch Industries pled guilty for several massive toxic benzene releases in Texas and covered it up. They contaminated Oklahoma's groundwater with jet fuel and toxic oil wastewater and cheated Native Americans out of royalties from oil and gas on tribal lands.
Other than that, the Kochs are fantastic, totally responsible, and great for the environment. Keep it in your pants. For much more on all of our stories today and the ones we couldn't get to, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find us and follow us on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
We are caught up in your love affair, and we'll never be royals. It's a run in our blood. That kind of love's just ain't for us.
Making the blue blood see red. The Rick Smith Show.
Fascists, you may be surprised. People all over this world are getting organized to bound to lose. You fascists are bound to lose.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, ricksmithshow.com. Some good news out at the University of Missouri. It seems that their president has stepped down. Tim Wolf announced that he will be stepping down over the controversy over the race relations problems that they seem to be having there at the university. He says he takes full responsibility for the incident that has occurred and for the inaction that has been. He says that, they need to stop intimidating each other. And then I guess kind of turned it around going, this isn't how, and I repeat, not the way change should come about. He says change comes from listening, learning, caring, and conversation. He says he's going to use his resignation to heal and start talking again. And I think, again, this is what organizing can do. This is what people coming together can do. And I think it's a good thing. Anyway, let's find out what's going on here in Pennsylvania. I understand the Paschy schools and the faculty are negotiating and talking about the next contract, which is why we've asked Kevin Mahoney, Raging Chicken Press, to come talk with us. Kevin, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, all right, Rick. Here we go again. I'll tell you, it feels like it's deja vu all over again with this contract.
So where are we? I mean, at some point, doesn't this have to get settled?
Well, you would think, but if you recall the last time round, during our last contract negotiation, this is APSCUF, last contract negotiations with the Pennsylvania State System of Higher Education, we were nearly 2 years out without a contract. And right now, the way that it's looking is like there is nothing there's no end in sight at this point. Back in October, APSCUF put forward a proposal to the state system, basically for just a 1-year extension. The thinking there was, okay, look, let's just get a 1-year contract and get it disconnected from this whole budget mess that is going on out there. And just basically keep things the way they are until we get on the other side of this and figure out what we're dealing with. And of course, the state system came back, not just this past week, and basically said, no, you know what, if we're going to do a 1-year extension, we got to take some stuff for you. We need our pound of flesh. We need to get some healthcare cost savings to get you to pay some of that. So, the president of APSCUF, Ken Mash, said, this is basically an incendiary proposal that came back. And so we're basically back to square one.
Wow. Because, again, you point out this stuff and, we need our pound of flesh, which means, and I love the way you framed it. You framed it in the corporate way, healthcare savings.
That's right.
It's not savings. It's theft. It's being taken from the workforce. And that's frustrating to me because, you look at all of this stuff that's going on. And at some point, don't we have to have, I don't know. I guess I'm just frustrated by this whole process.
Oh, you should be. And I think everybody should be. I mean, frankly, we need some more energy like we see down there in Missouri, right? To be everywhere. I mean, we need to hold these people accountable. Let me give you a sense of the state system of higher education's perspective. Like they just, at the November 2nd, I believe it was, they did a unilateral increase in healthcare costs for their for their managers and associated work personnel. Okay, so they increased their healthcare cost. Right now, on one hand, right, it's a good PR mood from their perspective of saying, hey, we're the management, we're going to take our little cut, we're going to tighten our belts, and we're going to pay a little bit more. Right. What got less news, however, was the fact that what that automatically did is that also raised the healthcare cost of the police, right, and the nurses on campuses, right? Because what they did in their contracts, and these are unionized folks, they had a Me Too clause in their contract, which basically said, look, if you're going to give your managers your kind of like golden healthcare, and you're going to give them all these benefits, well, we want that too. So what we'll do is we'll peg our healthcare to your healthcare. And the thinking, of course, at the time is like, you want to basically say, look, managers don't get to live in a separate world. But what they just did is they've kind of basically snuck in a kind of regressive tax against the police and the nurses by basically paying a little bit more by managers. The managers tighten their belt a little tiny bit. They basically doubled almost, in some case with their prescription drug companies, doubled the cost of prescription drugs, the out-of-pocket cost of prescription drugs from the police and the nurses.
Wow.
So it's incredible what they'll do, because and I call it a regressive tax in part because those folks that are bringing in $250,000 a year, a $5 increase in your copay for your prescription drugs is virtually nothing. But when you're coming in basically making just above the minimum wage or a little bit higher, and you get that $5 increase per prescription out-of-pocket cost, that's a significant chunk out of your pocket. And what's interesting about all this process is that when PASI introduced or released its statement about all its celebration about raising the healthcare costs as having savings, this is how they framed it. Okay, this is from their press release. It says, "We did this, quote, all without negatively impacting the student learning experience or reducing other important services," unquote. So basically what they're saying is that the student experience has nothing to do with the workers. It has nothing to do with faculty. It has nothing to do with any of the educational employees there. It only has to do with what you see on a spreadsheet, as if those cost increases don't impact the everyday experience of those workers on campus.
Wow. I mean, all I can come up with is wow. I mean, normally I'm shocked. I'm surprised. I'm not. I mean, this is what this is all turned into, isn't it? Though
it really is, and it's a shame. I mean, this is like I said, it's like deja vu all over again. And I tell you, Rick, it gets a bit frustrating. It gets exasperating. Going to work every day, and just basically what you want to do is you want to do your job. You want to be able to kind of teach it as best you can. You want to be there for your students. And you end up having to kind of deal with this kind of mindset that's looking to, kind of squeeze you at any chance they get, by stripping away your time, by kind of increasing your cost, by demanding more, all for less. And it gets exasperating. And, you see people, drives people out of the state system, right? And it basically, it creates a climate on our campus where people are frustrated and they're upset. And I don't think that is kind of what is an optimal learning experience, whatever Frank Brogan liked to say.
Yeah. Well, how much of this is the budget crisis that's going on right now? How much is driven by that? And how much of it is just, this is the new world that we live in?
Well, I think that part of what makes that a difficult question to answer for some, right, I think is that because negotiations extended, all the other unions, other than ABSCUF, all the other unions on campus settled their contract early. ABSCUF, for whatever reason, we were at the table, the state was at the table, but those contract negotiations did not move as quickly as the other unions. There was never the offer that came down from the Board of Governors for a contract similar to that of AFSCME or similar to that with some of the other unions. So as the budget deadline came and went, and as this has gone on, our contract negotiations, ABSCUF's contract negotiations, are now tied into the budget for better or for worse. And frankly, I think this gives the administration, this gives the Board of Governors, this gives the administration up in Harrisburg some leverage, at least to make arguments about why it is that they wanted to cut the cost in PASI. So there's no doubt it's tied into the budget. However, I don't think that's what's holding things up. think when it comes right down to it, I mean, I think PASHE, the administration, now with Frank Brogan and the former Chancellor Kavanaugh, they were after what they're calling, transformation of the state system of higher education. And basically, they look at the ABSCUF contract, especially the protections of their adjunct faculty members, and they don't want that anymore. They're looking for a way to take that away. And if you recall, a few years back when we were going through negotiations, that was the main proposal that the administration, that the Board of Governors, that the then Chancellor put on the table. They wanted basically to turn our adjuncts, who currently get paid on scale with our tenure track faculty. The vast majority of them are full-time with full benefits on scale with tenure track faculty, right? There's a system in our contract that allows them to convert to tenure track faculty, and they're limited in numbers at 25%. That is the exact opposite of how everything else in this country is going in higher education, where we have 75% of our faculty are tenured or tenure track. Out there in the rest of the world, 75% are adjunct working as piecemeal academic workers. And if you ask me, I would put money on this right now, right? We don't have a lot of information coming out about negotiations, but if I had to put money on it, I would say that's what's front and center of the holdup, is that PASHE wants to turn our system into a vast majority of academic piece workers. And, last time around, ABSCUF was pretty clear about saying there's no way we're going to let that happen.
And nor should they. I mean, at the end of the day, every person that I talk to who comes from academia, they all tell the same story of being exploited and all of the push towards part-time, no benefits, low wages. And I got to be honest, I don't know that that's good for students. I know it's not good for the institutions because it doesn't provide you with stability, and it's not good for society.
No, and I think that, you and I have talked about this a lot before. This also has to do with the ways that these, I don't know what else to call them, but, corporatists that are sitting there running our education systems, right? Is that when you start thinking about education as nothing but little packets of information that are designed to kind of be fed to students in order to accumulate so that they get a degree which credentials them for a job. If you think about that just solely as what education is about and not the act of learning, of critical thinking, about a dynamic engagement, right? About thinking outside of the boxes, not just what employers want you to think, right? But also about how to critically evaluate what you're being asked to do, or what your employers are asking you to do, or what your government is asking you to do. Right? If you're just thinking about it as little packets of information, right? Then you basically look at faculty members, as you look at faculty members, you see them as vending machines, right? That all it is about popping in the quarter and pushing your button to getting out your product. Right, unfortunately for them, right, as faculty, we have a different idea about what education should be. We have an idea about education that you're not just educating someone to kind of like pull the levers and be a cog in the machine, but you're thinking about creating dynamic, critical citizens that can make our democracy thrive. And it really worries me to see the directions that we keep on going. And the problem is, of course, the money is on the other side of it. And frankly, these proposals keep on coming, and people are getting more and more exhausted. My concern is that at some point people are going to break and say, "All right, whatever, I give up," and just let them run right over us.
Yeah, but if you do that, then that's pretty much the end of the tenured track professor, the long-term professor. You end up with with desperation.
No, that's absolutely right. That's absolutely right. And I think, but that's what they want, right? I mean, the minute that you basically can create kind of desperate academics, and this is what we've seen in higher education, although we put people's jobs in jeopardy on an everyday basis. The whole idea about freedom of thought, freedom of speech, about academic freedom, that just goes out the window. Because people are worried if you say the wrong thing, then you're going to be booted in the next day. That is bad for a democracy.
I look at you as the perfect example. I mean, you've had your run-in with Simple Simon and all of the harassment and the chaos that has brought to you, and I would assume on some level the institution. You could see in the future, if you had the audacity to say, I don't want some crank right-winger to know what my home address is, the university said, well, you don't need that hassle. You could just move along. That seems to me to be one of these scenarios down the road that quite possibly be happening.
That's absolutely, and let's not let me give you some additional examples from the Simple Simon over the summer. is like we had that kind of freedom of information request and me be willing to come up and go quite public on kind of what I felt about that. But also, remember last spring, I published a series of articles about the abuse of ASPE workers on the Kutztown University campus, right? That's my home institution. That's where I work, right? And then I published that. And if I didn't have the protections of academic freedom, right, if I didn't know that I had a union that was behind me, I don't know if those articles ever would have been published, right? Or on the flip side of it, I don't know if I would have a job right now. But the fact is that it's not, academic freedom is not just an idea, right? Freedom of speech is not just an idea. It has to be protected by the institutions. And frankly, the only institutions I trust are the ones that we self-organize, the ones that we democratically elect, our own organizations, workers' organizations, unions. And that's kind of, you know, and then if you think about a couple of years behind that or before that, I broke a story about PASHA universities trying to slip through revisions of their weapons policies. So that allowing open carry, allowing kind of guns to be brought on campus without really any public discussion of that. I broke that story, and that was one that kind of brought a national attention to my university and the PASHA schools. Right? You cannot tell me that if I didn't have the protections of my union or protections of my academic freedom, that I would still have a job today.
Well, isn't that the point? I mean, along with making folks desperate, you make them expendable and discardable.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, I hate to say this, but I see this on my own campus. I see this in other universities too as well. Even when you have protections of the union, there's that pressure basically to shut up and just do your job has effects on people. I watch people hold their mouth. I watch people not wanting to kind of ruffle feathers because they're worried about their job, even though they've got protection. And you know, again, if you can eat away at that power base, if you can eat away at what it allows us to kind of speak our minds and do what we're supposed to be doing as faculty members, then guess what? You know, that corporate side wins, and we start producing those cogs in the machine. And man, I'll tell you, I hope we don't get to that point. I hope we're able to continue to hold the line and not turn the corner into some sort of dystopian future.
Yeah, because you know, for a second, talk about what that future then looks like. Because when you're talking about not having tenured track professors and people who are long term there, and that's their career, that's their job, that's their focus and passion, and that's where they're going to be year after year, and trade that in for a guy who, you know, hey, I work at Burger King this week, or, you know, teach a class over at the university. What kind of student experience do you get then?
Well, you get a consumer experience. You get a consumer that you basically a compliant citizen, right? Or you get a bunch of dropouts, right? On the one hand, those students that go through that system, they will learn exactly what whoever's producing the curriculum. You know, if you look at what's happening through K through 12 with all these corporations that are producing curriculum for K through 12 that are basically saying, here's all your information packets to consume in order to get this degree, right? Without questioning what's its source, what's it's coming from, what's the interest behind that. You'll get the same thing in higher education, right? And which is exactly the opposite of what we need right now. Every kind of, you know, anyone who's looking at what the world is right now says that critical thinking is what we need, right? So the kinds of jobs, the kinds of future, the kinds of problems that we're facing as a society, we need people that are able to evaluate information and basically critically think about it and then act on that. And you would get exactly the opposite in that other future, where people are just, again, consuming packets of information in order to get credentials to get a job and never learn how to actually question what they're being told to do.
I mean, for me, this looks like an opportunity for the PASHA schools to say, hey, we're not where everybody else is going. This isn't just about checking off a box on the spreadsheet. This is about actual learning. I see so many opportunities of bucking the trend of corporate education and actually talking about real education. And as this continues down the road, I'd love to have you back and keep us up to breast of what's going on.
You got it, Rick, anytime.
Always great to talk with you. Kevin Mahoney, Raging Chicken Press. You want to check out their website, ragingchickenpress.org, the website. We've got a link at the Rick Smith Show. Just click on Kevin's name, take you right there. Quick break, right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Just like you, and I used to protest too, but the powers that be are too great, so walk away from the rebel faith.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. The UAW's Ford Council is meeting in Detroit Monday to review a tentative new labor deal with Ford. If approved, that deal will be sent to Ford UAW workers for a ratification vote. The Ford deal, according to the Detroit Free Press, is richer than the GM agreement was and provides $9 billion in investment commitments for U.S. operations. Over the weekend, the UAW's GM vote totals showed approval of the tentative labor agreement overall with GM by production workers, but skilled trades workers voted no, 59.5% to 40.5%. The UAW says as a result, it has, quote, not deemed the tentative agreement ratified, end quote. The union says it will hold meetings over the next several days to determine why skilled trades rejected the GM deal and determine what to do next. North America's building trades unions says that the Obama administration's rejection of the Keystone XL pipeline is an insidiously craven political action. Building trades president Sean McGarvey says, quote, despite this administration's own findings that the Keystone project will result in the creation of 40,000 jobs as well as significant economic benefits to our country without impacting the environment, President Obama has chosen to place politics over substantive policy that only serves to advance the agenda of well-funded radical environmentalists, end quote.
This is Mitch Lawrence with the Sports Minute for Workers Independent News. They've put the bats and baseballs away, and here's our takeaway from the 2015 baseball season. The Royals deserve to win their first World Series in 30 years. You might have missed most of the excitement and drama because the Royals came back in 3 games after the 8th inning to record their wins. That's typical of this Kansas City team, who made late-inning rallies a staple of their astounding playoff run. But for some of us on the East Coast, Nenio's teams pulled out those wins long after we had gone to sleep. The Royals won for only the second time in their team history, and they've built a team to compete for a few more titles. The Mets, well, they've got the young arms to contend, but 2 of their top players are heading into free agency, and the Mets just might let them walk. Daniel Murphy and Yoenis Cespedes were the Mets hitting stars before they both had a World Series to forget. Murphy just received a 1-year qualifying offer from the Mets for around $16 million, but he's expected to leave if he gets a richer multi-year offer from another team. Cespedes only came to the Mets late in the season and proved he was one of the team's top all-around players of all time. But he wants a 6-year deal at top dollar, and the Mets are not going to splurge for a player who's been with 4 teams over the last 2 seasons. Exciting as he is, he's not the world's most focused player, as they came to learn. So it'll be an interesting offseason for the Mets, especially if they have to replace Daniel Murphy and Yoenis Cespedes.
Brought to you by the IBEW, 750,000 men and women powering the way for an American comeback. Information on how to become an International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers Power Professional is online at ibew.org.
You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
Come on, ya got workers, good news to you I'll tell. About the good old union that's coming here to dwell. Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. So, just the other day I caught this story that grabbed my attention. In an Applebee's somewhere in Minnesota, there was a woman from Kenya speaking Swahili. And this is one of those things where you go, really? Is this how bad it's gotten in our country when you're talking about how intolerant we've become? Evidently, a woman walked up to her, said, "We want you speaking American," and hit her in the face with a beer mug for the crime of speaking another language. And, as I read this, I'm going, how intolerant have we become? And is there a way maybe forward so that maybe we're not so intolerant? And possibly education, could that be where it's at? Which is why I think it's interesting that there is a movement going on of teaching more ethnic studies in the classroom, more Mexican history, more African-American history, to open, enlighten, and maybe educate. Who knows? What a thought. Which is why I've asked Jose Lara. He's the National Education Association Social Justice Activist Award winner, also the vice president over at the El Rancho Unified School District there in Los Angeles. He's also a teacher in the South Central LA area. Jose, thanks for taking time for us.
Oh, thank you for having me on the show. I'm really excited.
I point to this incident that I saw in Minnesota where, for the crime of speaking another language, this woman is bludgeoned in public. And I look at this and go, how do we stop this kind of insanity?
Right. Well, I think you're right. It goes back to the classroom. It goes back to what students are learning. And in fact, several studies have been done about our classroom and race and ethnicity within our curriculum. And unfortunately, what we find is that we have a lot of our curriculum tends to be very Eurocentric, not talking about the contributions, the differences, multiculturalism in our history, in our culture. The United States is a nation of mostly immigrants, wiped out the native population, and brings different and unique cultures, and that's what makes the United States such a great place. That there's so many diverse cultures, but we don't learn about that in our history books. Our history books tend to be very Eurocentric, focusing on Western Europe primarily, leaving out the whole Eastern half and the rest of the entire world. So I have my students do this quick, quick review. And we're in California, the left coast, right? The progressive area, right?
Yeah.
Part of the country. Supposedly. I looked through our textbook and I said, hey, students, look through your textbook. Let's see how many times Latinos are mentioned in the textbook. Out of 900-page textbook that we have, Latinos were only mentioned 20 times in the textbook.
And I bet most of those were negative.
We weren't, no, not only that, but some of them were gray area, like, well, okay, Native Americans, like, were the Californios, or were they Mexican? We were very liberal when we counted what's called Latinos in the United States. But even the way they talked about the Latinos, and the way they were described in the curriculum was really stunning. And bear in mind that the majority of the students across California are students of color. And not only that, but we've already passed that threshold across the United States. Over 50% of all students across the country in the K through 12 education system are students of color. So the success of our country, the success is going to be partly dependent on the way we understand and interact with one another.
Right.
Number one. Number two, the success of these students who are non-white.
I agree with you. And at the end of it, what do you say to the person? Because I know what the response against this is. The idea that, well, this is a melting pot and this is America and you speak American, and that kind of narrow-minded thought process. How do you respond to that?
Well, absolutely. And I think the melting pot model is an old model that was taught very long ago, that we all melting pot into one America. And that's not really what's happening. That's not really what America is. If you look around the United States, what's it called? That's not what we have. What we have is more like a mosaic, right? Where you have different colors making one big picture that's united. And respecting those different pieces of the mosaic, recognizing them, knowing that they're part of the larger picture, is the way we should be going. And that's through these ethnic studies classes. So we've really moved here in California on ethnic studies classes. We have 5 school districts across the state that have made it a graduation requirement. We have 20 others that have expanded or established programs in ethnic studies. And we also have a pending statewide legislation that unfortunately was vetoed by the governor, but we're reintroducing it again next year to address some of the governor's concerns. And we're hopeful that it's going to get passed very soon.
How do you veto that? I mean, because, as someone who believes education is about opening your mind and expanding critical thinking skills and all of those things that are not related to what job am I going to get, I think this is an opportunity for people to look across the aisle, to look at a different culture and maybe, learn something.
Well, so I mean, the reason he gave in his veto message was that we already have a commission set up to look at ethnic studies. So we're just there's no new legislation needed to be done. They just need to get the commission to work on including ethnic studies into the mainstream curriculum. So it was kind of like, what? I'm not sure.
No, it sounds like it sounds like we're pushing it down the road a little
bit. But I don't support it. Right. And the reality is that there's a movement against ethnic studies. I mean, there's a movement against teaching about race and ethnicity in our classrooms. I mean, the state of Texas just moved to try to make slavery a side issue to the Civil War. I mean, really? The AP, the advanced placement exams, Recently, the commission, the organization that oversees the advanced placement exams, recently to change their test to take a softer stance on racism in America. So it's incredible that this kind of stuff is happening. Recently, there was a story where somebody really took to task one of the textbooks because it described slaves coming over to the United States as workers instead of slaves, and that's incredible. Like, yes, indeed, there were workers, but they were also forced into that work. It's not slavery. And to not describe it as such is a mischaracterization of history. And I know there are some of those out there that say, well, wait a minute, we have to promote, a patriotism in our country and, ethnic studies, it makes it segregationist, it sends the wrong message. Nothing could be further from the truth. As a matter of fact, recognizing other people, recognizing all people in our curriculum empowers them to be more part of the United States. History's ugly. It's not a pretty picture.
I absolutely agree.
We need to know about history, warts and all, to become better critical thinkers, to not be blind patriots.
And the other part of this,
conscience.
and the other part of it, Jose, is that you learn from history, so you don't make the same dumb mistakes over and over again. And I look at labor's history, which has been eviscerated from the schools. You want to talk about something that's been taken out? Labor's history has just been completely wiped away. And growing up as a kid, and this is a while ago, what I learned about labor's history is, there were the Molly Maguires, and they were criminals. That was about the extent of the labor history. We got nothing on ethnic studies, other than Christopher Columbus was a great guy. But to me, these are all things that I think are important, that are put out for people to discuss and to learn about and maybe think critically of.
No, absolutely, and no, not only that, but researcher Christine Slater did a research review, and I love research reviews because if I'm going to go out and read, a bunch of research, my mind's going to blow up. But Christine Slater looked at all the research on ethnic studies. She found in the high schools, and she found 17 of them. And what she saw is that every single study showed that ethnic studies has a positive benefit for students academically and socially. Not only that, but she found that but the targeted group being studied, it didn't matter because all students in the class benefited both socially and academically. In other words, if I'm a white student taking a Chicano studies class, I do better, and so does the Chicano student taking a Chicano studies class. Amazing.
Yeah, it is amazing. And what I find interesting, and you go back to Chris Rock, the comedian who did kind of a bit on this, he said he took an African-American studies course and realized he didn't know anything about African-American history.
Right. Absolutely. And then, a lot of students find that. And one thing that I found in my own personal educational journey, and those of others, my high school students that graduated and then come back and visit me, they always tell me, wow, why wasn't I taught this in high school? Like, why did I have to wait till college to be able to get exposed to these different types of ideas and these different types of cultures and diversity? Like, it shouldn't have to be that way. And not only that, but we're in a different place now. And we should be more tolerant of each other. We should be more, open-minded when we look at our curriculum and our education. And we have to have a curriculum that reflects the diversity of the experiences of our students.
So let me ask you this. Let me ask you this, Jose. What do you say to the person? Well, in South Central LA, that's great, but in the middle of Iowa or in the middle of Wisconsin, we don't necessarily need that. How do you respond to that?
Well, I think there's no place we need it more than in the middle of Wisconsin, Minneapolis, Iowa. There's nowhere where we need it more. We're a global society. Now, if Iowans want to stay in Iowa and not go anywhere and not be connected to anybody else, that's one thing. But that's not the world we live in. We live in a digital age where we could communicate across the country instantaneously, across the world instantaneously. Instead of looking at diversity as something negative, let's look at it as our strength. As a matter of fact, if you look at true American history, nothing could be further from the truth. It's our diversity that makes us strong. doesn't make us weak.
I'm with you. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're here with Jose Laura. He's a National Education Association Social Justice Activist Award winner, also vice president of his union, El Rancho Unified School District, also a teacher in South Central LA. And looking at this, Jose, and I go back to this moment that I brought up at the beginning of this woman being bludgeoned in the face for speaking another language. And to me, I think things like this are so very important. But you look at where education's going in this country, and it's grill and drill, it's fill in the bubbles, it's don't think critically, it's all of the things that I would argue what you want to do is complete opposite of.
Well, one of the beautiful things about ethnic studies is that it's not on the test.
Well, I mean, and that's my problem. That's my problem, Jose, because I can't tell you how many times I've gone to my kid's school and they tell me, oh, don't worry about it. Your kids will pass the test. And I go, but they're not taking the test. I want them to be more than just what's on that test, because education, to me, and you're the educator here, seems to be all about the test.
Yeah, and that's part of the problem, and we're really pushing, especially within our teachers union and this union. People across the country, organized teachers are saying enough with the testing already. We want to get to the learning. And the more money we spend on testing, the less money we can spend on programs that really get our students learning and to think critically, programs like Ethnic Studies. So there's a big machine out there right now that's pushing this testing agenda. And that testing agenda has a mandated scripted curricula that all students are supposed to learn. I mean, it is a melting pot model. Right, and ethnic studies, labor studies is counter to all of that. So we're part of this campaign is to also say, hey, look, we're not for that this industrial testing complex that we have in our country where students are reduced to nothing but a test score.
Yeah, at the end of it, I'm all in favor of what you're doing, because when it comes to learning a little bit of something that I don't know already, I'm all in favor of it. And I think exposing our children to different thoughts, different ideas is what education really is supposed to be.
Absolutely. 100%.
So how do we help get this pushed along? What should people be doing to help push this along? I understand you have a petition going around, right?
Yeah, we have a petition online. We have a couple petitions on our website, ethnicstudiesnow.com. We have a couple of school districts that are currently campaigning. Teachers, students, community members are really pushing their local school districts to start implementing ethnic studies classes, or even making it a requirement if they feel so strongly about it. But the campaign's moving on. Support to our website. Visit our website, ethnicstudiesnow.com, is one way to definitely support it. You can follow me on Twitter at Jose del Barrio, or on Facebook at Jose del Barrio. You can to get updates on what's going on, or our Ethnic Studies Now Twitter page as well. So that's at Ethnic Studies Now, where you can continue getting updates on what's going on and get involved.
All right, that's good stuff. Well, let me ask you another line of questioning, though, because as I'm looking at this and I'm thinking about, it's almost silo thinking, and I don't want to get into debating the silos, but how are the different ethnicities working together in this? Because I can imagine that you've got people who, my world is the African American studies, and my world is the Latino studies, and on and on and on, and then easily pitted against one another. How are you dealing with those borders?
Right. So, one of the things about our campaign is that we're really pushing for. We have a multi-ethnic group, what's called coalition growing. So, I mean, we have all ethnicities represented. We all want ethnic studies, and we believe that ethnic studies should be responsive to the needs of the local community. And that we should have studies. We should have ethnic studies that are more of a survey where folks look at many different ethnicities beyond their own. So we're pushing for both those things. So, for example, in Los Angeles, where 70% of the students are Latino, we want to push Latino American studies or Chicano studies within our schools. However, we do have parts of the city that are heavily Korean. We have parts of our city that are heavily Armenian, right? Which typically wouldn't think of as ethnic studies for Armenians. But indeed, one of the strong part of our coalition in Los Angeles is the Armenian community, who want to learn more about their culture inside of the classroom as well. What's the African American community? So we have some schools that are predominantly African American. We want to make sure that those schools teach African American studies, or Pan African studies, as we call it sometimes. But they also have the option of teaching at those schools ethnic studies in general as a survey class, where the students take a look at multiple ethnicities, not just their own.
And I think that's a good thing. And the more we learn about each other, I believe, the less we have these insane instances like we saw in Minnesota. Again, the website, ethnicstudiesnow.com. We've got a link at thericksmithshow.com. Just click on Jose Laura's name. I'll take you right there. Jose, it was great talking with you. I appreciate you taking time for us. And if there's anything we can do, please let us know.
Absolutely. I hope to talk to you soon and give you some updates on the growing campaign.
I look forward to it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Let's take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You listen to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
Oh, what distance can you stand it? Oh, tell me how you can. Will you be a lousy scab or will you be a man? Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1935. The Committee for Industrial Organizations was created by 8 unions as part of the American Federation of Labor. United Mine Workers President John L. Lewis was the driving force behind this new committee. His aim was to organize mass production industrial workers as opposed to focusing on those in the skilled trades. While the American Federation of Labor had included some industrial unions, the craft unionists were the dominant force in the organization. The Great Depression had hit industrial workers and their unions hard. Leaders from the heavily affected unions pressed for more support from the AFL. In response, the AFL did authorize organizing drives in the automobile, rubber, and steel industries, but they gave little financial support or effective leadership to those unions. Matters came to a head at the AFL's 1935 convention when mine workers president John L. Lewis punched the president of the Carpenters Union. Afterwards, Lewis called together various industrial union leaders, including Sidney Hillman, head of the Amalgamated Clothing Workers, and Harvey Fremming of the Oil Workers Union, to discuss the creation of the CIO. In its statement of purpose, the CIO declared its aim to encourage the AFL to organize by industry. However, the AFL's leadership was not sympathetic to what they saw as an internal rivalry. In 1936, the AFL suspended all of the CIO unions. This led to the industrial union's breakaway from the AFL to form a rival federation. The CIO changed its name to the Congress of Industrial Organizations. By 1938, the CIO had amassed 3 million members. The CIO ran successful organizing drives in auto, mining, meatpacking, and steel. The two union organizations finally remerged in 1955, forming what is known today as the AFL-CIO.
Tales of American Political History with Clinton Porter Hackney.
Mr. Speaker, for what purpose, Mr. Jones? Mr. Speaker, to extend my time, sir. The gentleman's time is extended. The job of Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives is a high-profile position full of pomp and ceremony, not to mention a lot of power. But history shows that it takes a special person to win the Speaker's gavel and keep it for very long. And that same history tells us that it's not a very easy job. The Speaker must organize, lead, and rule over several hundred politicians that are much like himself. Yet among those many elected congressmen, there are differing philosophies and ambitions representing varying types of geography, states, and people. And he also must play a leading role in his own political party. It's no wonder that some congressmen don't particularly want the job. But join us again next time for someone who absolutely loved it. This is Clinton Porter Hackney at cphackney.com.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME,
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Interesting conversation there with Jose Lara and the idea of expanding ethnic studies. And again, if you want to check out their website, ethnicstudiesnow.com. We'll get a link at thericksmithshow.com. Just click on Jose's name, take you right there. But this, kind of takes us to that area of not just, training students to think in different ways and be exposed to different cultures and ideas and thoughts and all that stuff, but maybe teachers as well. Maybe a diversity training for our educators, not a bad thing, which is why I've asked Denisha Jones to come talk with us. She is the visiting assistant professor of early childhood education at Howard University. This is also one of her areas of passion and study. Denisha, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks, Rick. How are you?
I am good. I just had a really interesting conversation here a minute ago with Jose Lara out in the LA area, talking about the need for students to be exposed to different cultures, different thoughts, ideas, and all that stuff. And I thought, teachers as well would probably benefit from that.
Yes, they absolutely will. We know that, the majority of teachers, it's going to be white, middle-class women, and we know that the student body is changing. So how do we make sure that our teachers are also prepared to teach all children well, and that's why it's also important in the pre-service field.
So the question is, how are we doing at that? I mean, as we're looking at the education system and the conversations I've had with people who are working to become teachers and newly careered teachers, the focus seems to be on factory work and not so much on critical thinking.
Yeah, that's true. And so it depends on the type of programs. Traditional teacher ed programs found in most four-year colleges and universities, depending on, they usually have one course, right? When I was a grad student at Indiana University, I taught in their elementary program, and they had a course on diversity. So it's typically done through one course, sometimes through a field experience or student teaching experience. We were fortunate that a lot of our students could go teach abroad. Starting first, we began the program with reservations and Native American communities, and then broadened it out to, across the country. So that's a really good experience because then you get to work with diverse, but not all schools offer that sort of program. So typically it's one course or it's embedded within. But the challenges have been requiring that be something that all schools have to offer for pre-service teachers. So in Indiana, we did it because we believed in it, but it wasn't a state requirement. So not every college would even offer at least one course in diversity. And in many states, it's not a state requirement as well.
Yeah, I don't know what Pennsylvania's rules are, but I would hope that it would be, because, you don't want somebody who has no idea of the culture they're teaching in to be there, I think. I mean, there would be, I think, a huge learning curve, no?
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge learning curve. I tell my students, I said, if you imagine you got a job teaching in Japan next, in 6 months, you had to go, and that's it. You were going to, you don't have to worry about speaking Japanese because you're going to be teaching English, but you're going to get a job and you're going to move to Japan. I said, what's the first thing you would do? Oh, I would learn a little bit about Japanese culture. I would learn to say basic, greetings. I would learn what schooling is like for Japanese children, and I would learn a little bit of history about Japan. I said, okay, now imagine you got a job teaching in Chicago public schools. Why wouldn't you do the same thing? You don't know anything about kids in Chicago. You don't know, anything. You're here from rural Indiana. Like, what do you know about that? It's that, but we don't take that mentality when we go work in urban communities, right? That we need to learn about those students just as we would if we were working in another country. And so that's one of the things I try and reinforce as to why it's so important. Yeah, we're all American. We're kind of same, but we're not. Culture is very complex, and it affects a lot about how students come to class ready to engage with you. And so, part of being a good teacher is understanding the nuances of the cultures your students have. And I think we're more willing to do that if we see them as being immigrants, but not necessarily if we see them as just being a different racial group or a different class group.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. And the other part of it is, the makeup of the community, also maybe how you teach and what you teach.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, there's, the biggest threat with the Common Core standards, or the biggest pushback is that, children all over the country need to have the same knowledge. I'm not convinced that children in, a Jersey town need to have the exact same knowledge as kids in a Montana town, right? Yeah, there's some basics we all need to know, but there are also specifics that you need to know about growing up in that area and what the community needs and that sort of thing. So I think, we need to understand that it's differences in each community. And that community's history with public schooling is also going to influence the relationships you build with them. You know, if they have very successful schools that are well invested, then those students are going to come prepared in a different mindset than if they're a community that's been disinvested with, you know, the not enough resources, then those kids are going to come in with a different mindset as well.
Yeah, I mean, everything that you're saying, though, is kind of the antithesis of what we're told education is, and where I see that it's going, which is the whole deprofessionalization, and, you know, just we're stamping out little widgets.
Yeah, and it's very funny because a lot of these organizations that are doing it, that are preparing teachers without going to traditional programs, I call them fast track teacher preparation programs. You'll see flyers in newspapers like, want to teach here? Come, you don't need a degree or student teaching. We'll have you teaching it immediately, right? Like, so now it's like, you don't need a body of knowledge to become a teacher. If you're just a warm body, we can make you a teacher. And a lot of them play on the statistics that children are poor and Black children, they need great teachers, but then they don't want to give you what it means to teach a poor Black child, right? They bring you in for that, right? Come and teach because these poor kids need you, but we expect you to teach them the same way we teach middle-class white kids. So it's a huge disconnect, right? Like you're saying that these students need great teachers, but you don't believe that the curriculum needs to be geared towards them, the teaching practices need to be geared for them. It's more than just having a warm body in the room committed to teaching. If you believe all children learn the same, then you're missing out on what these kids really need.
Yeah, you know, I remember a couple of years ago, I had looked at one of those because I had considered it. You know, it said all you need is a master's degree, and we'll teach you how to become a teacher, and you could change the world. And I remember thinking, you know, wow, what a noble cause, and you know, the school district's having a hard time, and it would be the most noble of endeavors. But I go, you know what? I've got 3 kids I can barely keep in check myself. I got to keep a whole classroom full of kids in check.
Yeah, with absolutely no preparation. I mean, I spent 5 years at the undergrad level to become a teacher, and that first year, it was so hard. But it's always hard because it's just a hard thing to prepare for in any way, because there's nothing like having all those kids to yourself. But I was thankful that I had to fall back on, and I made it through that first year. And I can't imagine people who've had 5 weeks of training being able to do it. It's so challenging even for someone. I mean, even the most veteran teachers struggle, right? I heard a National Teacher of the Year at a conference, the National Teacher of the Year, speak, and, you know, she said her hardest year was in her 7th year. I mean, you're pretty much a veteran, but then you get this class that just, you know, makes it so difficult. But part of it was that she had to build relationships. She had to get to know the students, get to know their culture, figure out how she can work with them. But she had the skills to do that. So there is a body of knowledge that you need to become a teacher, and there are skills and there are dispositions. And a lot of it you develop on the job through student teaching, through field experience, because there's only so much you can learn in the classroom. But there's a lot of things you need to learn in the classroom. But, you know, and this is all teachers too. A lot of people think when we talk about cultural competence or diversity training that it's just for white teachers. And I teach at a historically Black college and university, and I can tell you that my Black students need this training too. Just because they're Black doesn't mean they can relate to all Black children. A lot of them are middle class, upper class Black students who have no idea how to relate to poor Black children in Southeast DC, right? Because that's not their culture.
Right.
They share the same race, but they're very different. So we spend a lot of time breaking down assumptions about people who live in poverty and what does that mean, and how when you go into the classroom with these assumptions, right, it's hard to develop a relationship. So it's definitely something that all teachers need, no matter where you're at, because we all have these different beliefs about poor people or, you know, other people who are not like us. And so part of those courses, what they do is help you to, you know, point out those biases so that you don't enact them in your classroom.
I think that's important, a point you made there, because, you know, when most people think of diversity training, they think of race, you know, and not so much class. And I think that's an important point.
Oh yeah, I hear a lot of assumptions my students make about class. I mean, it's difficult. Their parents work hard. Everybody's parents work hard, and they're middle class and trying to hold on to it. And so they buy into a lot of this. I come in this era where it's just attack the poor for being poor. I had to read a case study about a teacher who was questioning why her 5th grade students had, you know, nice iPods and nice sneakers, but they couldn't bring in $15 for a science experiment. And I'm like, well, first of all, they're in 5th grade. You're making assumptions that they are in control of the things they purchase. You know, somebody buys them those nice sneakers. We don't even know where they come from, right? It could be gifts from, you know, your grandpa or your father that you only see once a year, and so he buys you nice stuff. And, you know, again, it's just this assumption that if you're poor and you have nice things, then, you know, coming up with $15 in the spur of a moment shouldn't be really difficult. But we don't know what it takes to get those things, and sometimes those nice things don't mean that you're still not poor, right? And so, but then I heard a lot of like, oh, they make bad choices. They'd rather spend that, you know, so it's frustrating because this is what happened in most of society. It's not just these students, but we've got this attitude where we blame the poor for being poor. And if they have anything that means means they're not poor, then we blame them for having nice things as well. And so how do you get people to see, how does that impact your relationship with a student if you have all these assumptions about their family and what they should and should not be buying and that sort of thing?
No, it's interesting to look at some people's value judgments of others. And then, because I remember a story not too long ago, it's been a couple of years actually, the woman who was driving the Mercedes went to a food pantry. And, when you hear the backstory, they both lost their job, they lost their home. The car was the last thing that they had. And she's like, should I have to get rid of my car and get something less reliable to make you happy that I'm poor enough?
Yeah, that's so true. And I tell my students a lot of times that you don't realize about when you're poor, you have nice things. I mean, first of all, there's not much you can do for your children when you're poor. So even though it doesn't make economic sense to buy something really expensive, you do that because that's how you show your children you care. And you want them to go to school looking nice because that's going to build their confidence, right? So again, poor parents kind of make that decision over time. But a lot of times, like if you in certain communities, people say, oh, well, they've got flat screen TVs and nice furniture, and I said they're actually usually paying for that over time in some horrible scam where they're renting this stuff. They're paying more for it in the long run. They don't own it, right? They might have computers and flat screens and PlayStations, but that's because there's an economy set up just for poor people to take advantage of them. We always had nice furniture. Well, my mom never owned any of it. She made monthly payments on it, and by the time she paid it off, it wasn't really worth it. So she would just get a new set and start the whole cycle over and over again. So I try and teach my students that, don't let these assumptions that most people don't own these nice things they have, and they're actually paying more for them than they would if they just went out and bought it. But they don't have the ability to just go out and buy it, so they pay for it over time, and it distorts people's perceptions. But again, I want to get to the fundamental issue. Why is it that poor people can't have nice things? If we believe that we need people to collect garbage and do menial labor, does that mean they have to live in a shack? Like, are we like, oh, sorry, you're poor, you can't have a nice home? I heard some elected officials said you can't have a refrigerator if you're really poor. Like, what kind of thinking is that? And, it's this crisis where we're at right now where we're blaming the poor just for being poor.
Oh, it's easy to point backwards than to look forward at the people who are ahead of us, pushing everyone down. I mean, you look at the wealth inequality in this country, and it's just staggering. And one of the things I remember from my youth is, it's really expensive to be poor, because I grew up in a housing project on the west side of Cleveland, and I remember a lot of that stuff. And you're right, people look down the tip of their nose at you for having something nice, only to find out that maybe you got it from Goodwill or it was a secondhand item that was handed down.
Yeah, and definitely that part about the expense of being poor is so true. I mean, there's all sorts of little hidden expenses, right? All of a sudden, you don't have enough money in your checking account, so they're going to start charging you these fees because you're poor, and it's like these things that people don't realize that just happened, or one little thing can happen to a poor person and ruin everything, and it's so expensive just to get out of that sort of thing as well. And I think it's like, who do you blame for these things? Like, I don't know why it's so easy to blame the poor person for you not having a middle class any longer instead of the people hoarding all the wealth at the top. But that's part of this idea, this meritocracy myth that we believe in, that those on the top have earned what they got. They deserve to be up there. And so let's not worry about them. It's those on the bottom who are, destroying the middle class. And well, we know that's not true, right? It's not the poor people, destroying what we have left. It's the people who are taking more than their fair share. And
Absolutely.
So a lot of that comes off in these courses that we prepare teachers for. Because again, a lot of teachers are going to be white middle class, and they don't know how to relate to poor students. I grew up poor too, so I'm more sympathetic to students who don't have much, because I can understand that. But most of our teachers don't come from that background.
Yeah, which is why with our kids in some of their classrooms, when there are things where you need $2 or $3 or $5, my wife always sends extra to the teacher to say, hey, if there's someone in the class who can't afford it, here's a couple of dollars to make sure that it doesn't come out of your pocket. Because sadly, in those situations, a lot of it falls on the back of the teacher, who's already, I think, underpaid and overworked. And then they're digging into their pocket for school supplies and for the $15 for a science project.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, a lot of schools, what they try to do is when you bring in the school supplies, they're kind of like communal. So everyone's asked to bring in pencils, pens, notebooks, and that sort of thing. And then they keep them so that they just give them out. Well, you have a lot of parents saying, why am I providing stuff for other people's children? So it's the quite opposite of how you and your wife do it, and it's like, it's kind of frustrating because you want to say, you're a horrible human being if you don't believe in sharing these resources for all children. Some parents don't have $15 right now. They might not have it till later on in the month, or that's the difference between, getting some medicine or getting some diapers or something, or giving their kid for a science experience doesn't seem that important when it's versus food or versus something else that's really important. So there are many reasons why, and usually the timing of it. I think when schools don't realize that a lot of parents who are on a fixed income, only getting money once a month, they just can't afford things in the middle of the month that they could if they had enough planning that are we really going to supportive of the collective good, or are we going to keep this kind of individual meritocracy that really just makes it harder to just invest in good public schools for all?
But hold on, the meritocracy thing, Denisha, I buy into the meritocracy thing if it were actually functional. The problem is people are working really hard and not being rewarded for the work that they do. So I like the concept, and I think everyone does. It's just not functional. So last question I've got for you in moving this forward, because I think we've hit on a lot of things that are very important and maybe open some folks' eyes. How do we push this conversation further?
Well, I think we have to understand that as, statistics show us that our teaching force, and our student population, right, we have a majority of students who are in poverty. Pretty soon, I think majority of students are minority in many states, if not nationally. And so that's just, we have to keep understanding that things are changing, right? Our student population is more diverse, coming from more low-income families, and our teaching force isn't. And if we want to raise the achievement of everybody, because it's better for society if everybody does well, and doesn't go into the juvenile justice system and that sort of thing, then we have to look at the basics of teaching, the curriculum, the way we teach, right? We can't just test our way out of this. We can't just increase accountability for teachers, making them responsible for things outside of their control. So I want to see some good reforms in education, the ones that say, what are we teaching? How are we teaching it? Is it best for these students? Because I think we've created a system that works best for middle class children and those children who share those values. But now that our student population is changing, we have to look at that as well.
There you go. Denisha, I appreciate you taking a little time for us. Thanks so much for the conversation.
Thank you, Rick.
Really great talking with you, Denisha Jones. She's a visiting assistant professor there at Howard University of Early Childhood Education. You want to take a look at some of her work? Just go to thericksmithshow.com, click on Denisha's name, take you right there. Let's take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people on the talk.
Let's run away.
A good profit is profit that comes from contributing to society.
Koch brothers claim they are environmental stewards.
It is said, if you find yourself in a hole, quit digging.
New legislation to stop all fossil fuel extraction on public lands. More bad news for Volkswagen. Plus,
We have told TransCanada that the review process is going to continue.
U.S. State Department rejects TransCanada's request for a pause on the Keystone XL pipeline.
All of those stories and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
I tried to jump in. I said, Jake, you want a skeptic? I'm right here.
Oh, did Jake ignore you, Ted Cruz? So will we. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, TransCanada was trying to cancel the Keystone XL pipeline review, but now President Obama won't let them?
That's right. They have been denied. The U.S. State Department has rejected the request from TransCanada, the owner of the controversial proposed Keystone XL pipeline, to suspend its application for a cross-border permit. It was a request widely seen as an attempt to wait for a potentially friendlier administration. In rejecting the request, State Department spokesman John Kirby on Wednesday cited the time and money invested by several agencies and the millions of public comments received in the process.
So all of this work, all of this money has been spent reviewing their application, and before it gets rejected, they want to stop the whole procedure.
Yeah, it's like breaking up with somebody before they have a chance to break up with you.
But in this case, Obama might say, no, I'm going to break up with you anyway. I'm going to reject your application and thus make it a little bit harder for the next president to come along and approve it.
That's right. That's exactly what he's doing.
Well, that's fun.
Meanwhile, scientists say that to prevent catastrophic climate change, 80% of the world's remaining fossil fuel reserves must remain in the ground unburned. And to that end, Democratic Senator Jeff Merkley of Oregon and Independent Senator and Democratic presidential candidate Bernie Sanders of Vermont introduced the Keep It in the Ground bill in the U.S. Senate on Wednesday. It would prohibit all new leases to extract fossil fuels on public lands, not to reduce fossil fuels from public lands, but to eliminate them. In a press conference, Senator Merkley called it a crucial step to action on climate change.
Let's take on this climate change challenge. Let's make our federal lands off limits, and let's do the smart thing and keep it in the ground.
The bill would also ban new offshore drilling in the Atlantic Ocean and in the Arctic and would help transition fossil fuel industry workers. The bill isn't likely to go anywhere in the Republican-controlled Senate, but as they say, it does begin the process of educating the American people about what we have to do.
So what's it called again?
The Keep It in the Ground bill.
Kind of sounds like Keep It in Your Pants bill, but I won't mention that.
Please don't.
I won't.
More bad news for Volkswagen. Remember, German automaker Volkswagen was caught red-handed last month using software to cheat U.S. emissions tests on as many as 11 million Volkswagen brand diesel cars since 2009. Now, this week, Volkswagen voluntarily has halted sales of its Porsche brand SUV in the United States after the Environmental Protection Agency said it found similar cheat software on those models. But wait, there's more. Volkswagen has also admitted this week that it underestimated the actual carbon dioxide emissions and fuel consumption in regulatory filings, affecting some 800,000 vehicles in Europe. Volkswagen says it deeply regrets this newest mistake.
Doesn't anyone check their claims when they make them, or is this completely self-regulated?
Often, car makers are allowed to submit their own tests for certification.
Nothing like voluntary self-oversight.
Finally, some fact-checking for MSNBC. In what I think is a fawning interview with billionaire Koch brother Charles Koch this week, the hosts of MSNBC's Morning Joe did not challenge the abysmal environmental record of the Koch brothers' businesses when Charles Koch claimed his idea of success includes protecting the environment.
For a business, this means producing products and services that your customers value more than the alternatives, while more efficiently using resources and being among the safest and environmentally protective producer.
For the record, Koch Industries is not among the safest and environmentally protective producers. Koch Industries has a long history of profiting from egregious violations of environmental laws. Koch Industries pled guilty for several massive toxic benzene releases in Texas and covered it up. They contaminated Oklahoma's groundwater with jet fuel and toxic oil wastewater and cheated Native Americans out of royalties from oil and gas on tribal lands.
Other than that, the Kochs are fantastic, totally responsible, and great for the environment. Keep it in your pants. For much more on all of our stories today and the ones we couldn't get to, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find us and follow us on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
We are caught up in your love affair, and we'll never be royals. It's a running our blood. That kind of love's just ain't for us.
These are words you should have told the truth. Your life got the proof. Where you gonna run to? Where you gonna hide? You're running for the door now. No one's getting out alive. Where you gonna run to?
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. So I got this. What I love about our audience is that I'm constantly sent, really radical right-wing stuff. And what I love is that people send me articles and kind of do my work for me. That's not nice. But try to keep up on what's going on and say, hey, did you see this? And I appreciate it. Thank you. Please continue to send stuff. The biggest one being that Bernie Sanders is leaving money on the table. And the email I got was a long diatribe of why people like Bernie can't win, and the whole 9 yards, that they don't know how to work the system. And here's the thing: this is where I truly believe Bernie knows how to work the system. He's just not. And why is the important part? You can't run around. It would be like me saying, you know what, listen to our show. I want workers to organize. I want workers to have rights on the job, but Walmart would be my big sponsor. Then I would have to, kowtow to the Walmart message and image, but while still somewhat trying to say, but they're good, but they should allow their workers to maybe have some voice. How do you do that? And that's honestly, that's where people like Bernie, I think, people like me are, we believe in what we say, and we say what we believe, and you stick to that. So Bernie's not going to the big money machine. He's not going to Wall Street, because how do you go to Wall Street and go, hey, give me a boatload of cash? How do you go, to these big hedge fund managers and say, hey, where the money machine is? How do you go, give me, without them going, okay, we'll be happy to give you. But what are you going to give us? And there was a Politico article that I got that said, Bernie's not, doing the Northern California, fundraising trips. He's leaving all of this money there because that's where the wealthy up in the valley, that's where they are, the liberal money machine. And why isn't he doing it? Because Hillary's there and she's doing a lot of fundraisers. And the reality is look, his belief, and I'm not trying to speak for him, but the reality is what he's doing is he's saying, we need a grassroots movement of people, not a handful of big donors who are going to raise big money events, but of actual people like you and me, who send $10 or $20,000, $10 or $20, not 20,000. And his campaign, the spokesman for the campaign, pretty much laid that out. Look, we haven't ignored those areas where the money is. It's just not where we want to spend our time. We want to spend our time on the ground with people. And as they point out, their online fundraising has been, one of the most successful parts of what they're doing, of drawing people in, folks who don't have, $2,700 to hand out, but can send 20. And to me, that's what's really important, because what we've seen, and I think the last election just kind of bore that out, where you had, 25% of the registered voters showing up. And that's, you cut that in half when you talk about the number of citizens, because only about half the people bother to register, let alone vote. So for me, to energize the number of people to come back to the political process, that's kind of where he's going. And I get that. And I like that. It's one of the things that I've said from the beginning about this campaign. When I was quoted back in February about, the chances of him running, I said, I think it would be a great thing for the country, because it might take us back to those days of invigorated campaigns, of not just, corporate campaigns where you send in an organizer to try and get 20 people. This is about engaging everyone. And I think that's really very important. I think that's one of those things that we've been sorely lacking in our politics. And I'm excited. I'm excited to see what's going to come out of this, because you've already seen what I would consider victories, because you've seen the Democratic Party move to the workers' side. And you've seen them, starting to talk about working class issues, where I truly believe no Bernie, no working class issues. It's a whole different Hillary. It's a whole different discussion. It's a whole different debate. Now, on the other side, and this is where I wish there were a Republican who had a chance. I wish there were a Republican Bernie who would go to these Republican debates and talk about working class issues from the perspective of a working person. You see, Republicans used to have those. They did. There used to be working class Republicans, sure. The problem is that they've now turned into give me the money Republicans. And I've been asking for years, please get me some working class Republicans to bring your party somewhere near the sanity line. I'm not saying go all the way back to Eisenhower, but somewhere at least near Reagan, who, while at the time insane, looks very rational today. And tomorrow night with the big debate in Milwaukee, you go, what possibly could come out of this? Will Ben Carson be asked about his military record or his claim to have turned away from one? Will Donald be asked Saturday Night Live questions? Yes, those are coming. Anyway, the debate will last for 2 hours. That's been negotiated, I guess. It's going to begin at 9 p.m. Eastern time. There are a few changes, I guess, to the format. The candidates will not make opening statements, but they will have more time to make their arguments. For the initial answer to a question, they get 90 seconds and 30 seconds for rebuttal. There will be a short closing. The debate will be on Fox Business Network, and they will be streaming it online for free, foxbusiness.com. I hate promoting them, but if you want to watch it, that's where you go. They're going to talk about jobs, taxes, the general health and well-being of the economy, as well as some international issues. It'll be interesting to see where this goes. I understand Chris Christie and Mike Huckabee have been dropped down to the JV level, and they will be there with, I guess, Santorum and is it Pataki or is it the I don't even remember. I know I think Lindsey Graham and Pataki have been dropped altogether. I think they're done, and fortunately, because their polling numbers not so good. I guess Jindal, Santorum, then Christie and Huckabee in the JV debate at 7, and then the rest of the clan at 9. And look, it should be interesting to see where they're going to be. Obviously, Trump will be in the center of the stage, radiating out based on polling, and it's going to be like a Saturday Night Live skit. But this is the 5th debate, so that should be fun. The next Democratic Party debate, if you saw the South Carolina Forum last week, the next one will be in Des Moines, Iowa on Saturday the 14th, hosted by CBS at Drake University. That should be, I guess, more of the same. Look, they've been very cordial. It's been informative. I think they've been good, and nobody's watching because there's no entertainment there. They're actually talking about issues, which, then you got to ask the question. If the numbers are down on the substantive ones and Bread and Circus is doing well, what do you think the networks want? I think the reality TV show writers have got to be going to the Democrats. Hey, can you gin up something? Give us some controversy. Maybe Bernie and Hillary go at it with a knife or something, or claim you threw a knife. I don't know, something. You kind of gotta wonder. Anyway, so there you go. There's your debate prep. Get ready for it. Drinking game. Any word that comes out of Trump's mouth with an LY at the end. Bigly, hugely, amazingly. That's the drinking game. Tomorrow, going to be on the road in Allentown. Going to be doing some recording throughout the day. Hopefully we'll get something back here before 3 o'clock. But there's the big Fight for 15 rally, and also they're going to be out at a nursing home protesting the massive cuts that the nursing home wants to make against their already low-paid workers. So I thought it'd be a good opportunity to go out, speak there, and be on the ground, since that's what I really love. And we'll be back on Wednesday with some of those interviews. We'll play them throughout the week. They'll be up at thericksmithshow.com. You can take a listen to them there. But yeah, good stuff all the way around. Looking forward to tomorrow's Fight for 15 day. Some strikes in some 270 cities across the country. Should be good stuff. If you missed any portion of the program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go for the podcast. the Rick Smith Show app on your smartphone. Take the program on the go. And as always, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Thanks for being here. See you back here tomorrow.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Together, we can make America better. Email rick@thericksmithshow.com or interact with us anytime at thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
It's color like the tide flood beneath the lunar sway. Imperial, mysterious, in amorous array. Democracy is coming.